A diplomatic headline slipped by unnoticed. Canada is opening a consulate in Greenland. Sounds routine. It is not. Greenland is not about ice. It is about power, shipping lanes, rare minerals, and military access. This is how influence shifts, quietly, strategically, before anyone is paying attention. If this helped you see what is really happening, hit like and share it. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. These conversations matter. I am Robert Reich, professor of public policy at UC Berkeley, and I have spent my career studying the intersection of economics, power, and democracy. Today, I want to explain what is really going on here. Because the United States was not pushed out, it simply was not paying attention. While Washington argued over yesterday's headlines, Canada quietly stepped into a strategic space America assumed it owned by default. And Greenland noticed instantly when a Greenlandic lawmaker responded with a single word, finally. That was not diplomacy. That was frustration boiling over. It was the sound of a partner waiting years for the United States to show up and realizing it never did. That was not relief. That was a wake-up call, and Washington should be panicking. On the surface, Canada opening a consulate in Greenland looks small, routine, and polite. But look closer. This move exposes the gap between United States arrogance and global reality. Greenland did not cheer for Canada. They sighed with relief. Because while the United States treated the Arctic like a toy or a punchline, Canada treated it like a partner. For years, the United States assumed dominance by default. Trump joked about buying Greenland, treating an entire society like a real estate listing. The message to the world was clear. The United States sees power as entitlement, not responsibility. That is arrogance. That is complacency. And the world noticed. Canada did not tweet threats. They did not brandish military posturing. They did not make a spectacle. They showed up, opened doors, listened, and acted. Simple, strategic, effective. Meanwhile, Washington indifference and grandstanding left a vacuum, one that others stepped into without firing a single shot. This is how influence slips away, not with explosions, but with patience, respect, and consistent engagement. Things the United States took for granted until it noticed its neighbors quietly rewriting the rules. One word from a Greenlandic lawmaker. Finally. Said it all. Finally, someone is being taken seriously. And it was not the United States. Complacency is not harmless. Arrogance is not strength. And when global partners stop seeing you as indispensable, you do not just lose leverage, you lose relevance. Trump openly said the United States needs Greenland for national security and that somehow, one way or another, America will get it. That was not a throwaway line. It became a recurring theme. And Greenland, along with Denmark, did not laugh. They were offended, because when you treat people and land like property, you expose how little you understand the political reality of the Arctic today. Greenland is not empty space. It is not a pawn on a map. It is home to a population with deep indigenous ties spanning Canada, Alaska, and Greenland itself. Ties that existed long before NATO maps, Cold War bases, or political headlines. Canada recognized that reality instead of bulldozing over it. By opening a consulate, Canada did not make noise. They did not stage a spectacle. They sent a signal. A senior Canadian minister traveled north not to perform, but to institutionalize influence. Quiet, persistent, effective. This is geopolitics basics. Boring moves win. Loud gestures do not. Meanwhile, the United States, obsessed with theatrical gestures and headlines, continues to treat the Arctic like a game it already owns. And that is exactly why the world is recalibrating. Trust is not built with tweets or threats. It is built with offices, visas, shipping agreements, energy cooperation, and consistent action. And that is the opposite of how the Trump era approached power. Meanwhile, the Arctic is no longer a distant frozen frontier. Melting ice opens new shipping corridors. Critical minerals are becoming accessible. Military planners are paying attention. Russia is entrenched. China is probing. And the United States is present but increasingly distrusted. Into that vacuum, Canada made itself indispensable. For Greenland, this matters economically and politically. Most of what Greenland consumes passes through Denmark, adding costs, delays, and dependence on European supply chains not suited for Arctic realities. Canada is close. Canada already trades with Greenland. Canada sits inside the North American trade network Greenland has watched from the sidelines for years. The consulate is not just a building, it is a bridge. What you are seeing is not a headline about diplomacy. It is a lesson in how power actually shifts. Loud demands do not create loyalty. Tariffs do not build trust. Treating allies like assets does not generate influence. Showing up does. Investing does. Respecting autonomy does. Canada understood that. Greenland responded immediately. Meanwhile, the United States, distracted by bluster, nostalgia, and spectacle, is realizing influence in the Arctic is slipping, not because it was taken, but because it was neglected. And it goes deeper. Denmark itself, responsible for Greenland foreign affairs, is pushing back. Danish officials raised concerns about American actors linked to the Trump ecosystem attempting to influence Greenlandic politics from within. Complacency has consequences, and the Arctic is proving it, not with tanks or bases, but with networks, messaging, and quiet influence. Denmark treated United States maneuvers not as routine politics, but as a breach of trust. In NATO, unity is built on respect, not covert games. Meanwhile, Canada invested in capacity instead of spectacle. While the United States leaned on tariffs, threats, and transactional diplomacy, Canada built energy infrastructure, expanded clean industrial production, and strengthened ties with partners focused on long-term stability. The difference is now visible in the Arctic. Greenland is signaling loudly without saying much. Its leaders want deeper integration with North America economic system. They have watched North American Free Trade Agreement evolve into United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement from the sidelines, observed supply chains form, and industrial ecosystems stabilize south of them, all while remaining dependent on distant European logistics. The Canadian consulate is not about annexation. It is not about dependency. It is about integration on terms that are negotiated, strategic, and durable. This is the exact opposite of how the Trump worldview sees international relations. In that frame, power is seized, markets are coerced, and alliances are measured by obedience. But economies do not work like that. They rely on predictability, infrastructure, and trust. Canada understands this. Its Arctic moves are not just diplomacy. They are part of its climate-era industrial strategy. Europe is rolling out carbon border tariffs that punish high-emission goods, reshaping trade whether Washington likes it or not. Canada already produces aluminum and energy with relatively clean power. Denmark invests in renewables. Greenland sits at the crossroads of it all. The United States tariffs were supposed to pull investment stateside. Instead, they pushed Canada to reindustrialize on its own terms. Public investments in energy, grid stability, nuclear development, and industrial security are surging. These are not abstract policies. They determine where factories are built, where jobs exist, and who controls critical supply chains. When Canada builds reactors and transmission lines, it is not just generating electricity, it is generating leverage. When it opens a consulate in Greenland, it is not just issuing visas, it is cementing influence in the Arctic. While Washington scrambled, Canada moved. Canada is not just opening a consulate in Greenland, it is embedding itself into the future logistics of the Arctic. Greenland's positive response is not casual, it is a clear message. Influence now flows to those who offer partnership, not pressure. The media barely notices because it prefers personality-driven conflict. It is easier to talk about Trump rhetoric than to analyze Canada industrial strategy. It is easier to frame this as a diplomatic curiosity than as a structural shift in North America power. The real question is not why Trump is upset. The real question is why Canada saw the moment coming while Washington slept. This pattern is not unique to the Arctic. Everywhere, states rely on confrontation over capacity. Loud power fades while quiet builders accumulate influence. If you want to know where global power is really heading, stop watching speeches. Watch supply chains, energy infrastructure, and investment in long-term stability. Look at who is protecting workers while reducing risk for investors, and who is chasing headlines. The answers reveal more about the next decade than any press release ever will. Because this is not abstract. Economic integration shapes jobs, controls resources, and stabilizes communities when shocks hit. When trade flows are predictable, families can plan. When influence is earned quietly, nations gain leverage, and the United States falls behind. When energy is affordable and reliable, industries thrive. And when alliances are built on mutual interest instead of coercion, smaller economies do not have to choose between dignity and survival. That is exactly what Canada understood with its move into Greenland. Greenland was not waiting for Washington. It was waiting for a partner who respected its autonomy and offered tangible economic benefits. That is a fundamentally different theory of power than the one the United States has been operating under. Capital flows towards stability. Firms invest where costs are predictable, resources are accessible, and regulations do not swing with the latest headline, while workers build lives where jobs are not disrupted by political theater. The United States treats trade policy as a weapon and diplomacy as a loyalty test, creating uncertainty that drives both capital and labor to hedge their bets. Canada did not need to overpower Washington. It outplanned it. By investing in grid infrastructure, aligning provincial energy policies, and treating the Arctic as a long-term economic region rather than a military frontier, Canada positioned itself as the more reliable partner. This is not morality. It is market logic. For working people on both sides of the border, this means skilled jobs that cannot be offshored, reduced risk of sudden supply disruptions hitting wages and prices, and a path toward economic integration for Greenland that does not require surrendering sovereignty. Canada is not just building a consulate, it is building leverage, stability, and trust. And Washington is only now realizing what it missed. Contrast that with the American approach during the Trump years. Tariffs raised costs for manufacturers and consumers alike. Trade uncertainty made long-term planning impossible, and diplomatic chaos meant even close allies could not count on continuity. That environment rewarded financial speculation over industrial production, benefiting traders more than workers, and weakening the very industrial base it claimed to defend. When capital senses chaos, it either demands higher returns or leaves. Canada offered something different: boring reliability. Greenland interest fits directly into this logic. Integration into North America trade systems is not about flags or allegiance. It is about lowering transaction costs, shortening supply lines, and plugging into an industrial ecosystem, preparing for a low-carbon future rather than resisting it. From a material standpoint, this is simply rational. The media narrative often fails by framing Trump fixation on Greenland as a personality quirk, obscuring the deeper institutional failure. The real issue is not one politician comments. It is that the United States allowed its diplomatic, economic, and industrial strategies to drift out of alignment. When that happens, even allies hedge. Hedging is not betrayal, it is survival. Smaller actors do not wait for great powers to fix themselves. They diversify relationships. They seek redundancy. They build exits. Greenland exploring deeper ties with Canada is not anti-American. It is pro-resilience. Denmark's willingness to publicly challenge Washington is not hostility. It is boundary setting. These are rational responses inside an unstable system. For working people, these shifts shape everyday life in ways that rarely get explained. Stable trade reduces price spikes. Clean energy investment creates skilled jobs that cannot be offshored easily. Diplomatic trust lowers the risk of sudden disruptions that hit wages and pensions first. When power is exercised predictably, ordinary people can plan. When it is exercised impulsively, they absorb the shock. The deeper lesson is uncomfortable but necessary. Capitalism rewards systems that minimize uncertainty for capital accumulation. Right now, Canada is doing that better than the United States in certain strategic domains. That does not make Canada virtuous. It makes it functional. And functionality, not rhetoric, is what shapes the next decade. If the United States wants to regain influence, it will not do so by demanding loyalty or threatening annexation. Influence will not be regained through hollow rhetoric. It will come from rebuilding institutional credibility, investing in public goods, respecting partners, and aligning economic policy with material reality rather than cultural grievance. Until that happens, others will quietly move forward. You do not have to cheer for any country to see this. Just watch where trust flows, where infrastructure is built, and who listens instead of lectures. These patterns reveal far more than speeches ever could. Across energy, trade, and labor politics, the same dynamic repeats. Countries that lecture about strength while hollowing out public capacity scramble when influence slips. Governments that treat infrastructure as an expense rather than an investment are shocked when partners look elsewhere. This is not hypocrisy. It is structural blindness, most visible at the edges of empire where neglect feels safe but becomes dangerous. The Arctic is one such edge, remote enough that neglect seems harmless yet strategically critical. For decades, the United States assumed military presence alone would secure loyalty, but force without economic integration creates dependency, not trust. Canada recognized that influence in the 21st century is as much about logistics as defense. What makes this especially revealing is how quietly it happened. No crisis, no emergency summit, no dramatic rupture. Just a clear-eyed understanding that the window was open and that showing up mattered. That is how competent states operate. They do not wait for collapse. They move early, incrementally, and with an eye towards systems rather than headlines. The United States, by contrast, has spent years turning governance into performance, trade policy into a stage for grievance, diplomacy into a test of dominance, and energy policy into a culture war. In such an environment, long-term planning collapses, bureaucracies hollow out, expertise drains away, and allies notice that continuity is gone. When continuity disappears, so does trust. This is not about whether Trump personally liked Greenland or whether future administrations will reverse his rhetoric. The damage comes from signaling unpredictability. Markets price it in, governments hedge against it. Smaller regions like Greenland look for partners who feel boring and stable rather than powerful and volatile. Canada benefited from that shift, not because it schemed, but because it offered the opposite signal. For working people watching from the outside, it may seem abstract, but the consequences are concrete. When supply chains are stable, shelves stay stocked, and prices fluctuate less. When energy systems are built deliberately and publicly, jobs last longer and communities hold together. When diplomacy reduces friction, shocks are absorbed instead of passed down. These are not elite concerns. They are the difference between security and precarity. The lessons are not mysterious. Infrastructure pays for itself. Public investment attracts private investment. Trust lowers transaction costs. Cooperation beats coercion in complex systems. Yet political systems built around spectacle keep rediscovering these truths the hard way. When outrage flares over Canada, outmaneuvering the United States or Greenland defying expectations, resist framing it as drama. This is not about humiliation. It is about incentives. The system rewarded the actor that reduced risk and punished the one that increased it. That is how capitalism works. The real question is whether the United States will learn from this or double down on the habits that caused it. Will it rebuild capacity, invest in energy, logistics, and trust, or will it keep mistaking noise for power? These choices matter far more than any single consulate. In today's digital world, cryptocurrency is no longer just a trend. For many people, it has become a real business opportunity that can be started with basic knowledge and an internet connection. The first step in treating crypto as a business is education. Understanding simple concepts like Bitcoin, Ethereum, wallets, exchanges, and how the market works is essential before putting in any money. Some people use trading to earn short-term profits, while others focus on long-term holding. And there are also options like staking and passive income where crypto can grow over time without constant buying and selling. What makes crypto attractive is flexibility. You can work from anywhere, control your own schedule, and start with a small amount if you are careful. However, crypto is not gambling. Successful people treat it seriously. They do proper research, manage risk wisely, and never invest money they cannot afford to lose. The market goes up and down, so patience and discipline matter more than chasing quick profits. When crypto is handled with planning and consistency, it can become a long-term income path instead of a risky shortcut. If you want more simple and practical videos about crypto and online income, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay connected for upcoming content.